Zion's heart hammered in his chest as the judge's gavel struck, sealing his fate. The weight of the words "not guilty" echoed in his mind, yet relief was dulled by a lingering sense of disbelief. He was free, but the battle had only begun. Sergeant Kincaid's face turned a shade of crimson that spoke volumes. This wasn't just about one wrongful arrest, it was a reflection of a broken system, one that had already claimed too many lives. As he stepped out of the courtroom, the throng of reporters swarmed like bees around a hive. Microphones and cameras jostled for position, capturing every moment of his unexpected victory. Zion's mother, Lorraine, kept her grip firm on his shoulder, anchoring him amidst the chaos. "Zion, how does it feel to prove your innocence?" a reporter shouted, thrusting a microphone toward him. He hesitated, memory flashing back to being handcuffed, humiliated, and tossed aside like an afterthought. "I shouldn't have had to prove my innocence," he replied, his voice steady, piercing through the noise. Silence enveloped the crowd, murmurs spreading like ripples in a pond. Those words hung in the air, electrifying and heavy with truth. Around him, people shifted uncomfortably. The uncomfortable truth of his experience lingered in the atmosphere. Lorraine's proud smile broke through, but concern shadowed her eyes. Before she could pull him away, a familiar face called out to him. "Hey, kid," shouted Mr. Langford, the school librarian, pushing through the crowd. Zion's classmates surrounded him, their faces a mix of admiration and surprise. "You did it." Langford grinned, clapping Zion on the shoulder. "You made them listen." "Yeah, but the real question is, what about the kids who don't get a chance?" Zion's voice cracked, the weight of what could have been hung heavy in the air. Langford's smile faded, replaced with a look of understanding. "Then maybe it's your job to make sure they do," he said, his gaze steady. Zion nodded, determination igniting a fire within him. He hadn't just fought for his freedom, he'd unveiled a harsh reality that couldn't be ignored. This fight was far from over. In the days that followed, news of Sergeant Kincaid's internal investigation made headlines. Reports surfaced detailing other kids, other lives devastated by false accusations and forced pleas. Zion's case was the spark that ignited a conversation that had been long overdue. He found himself glued to the news, restless with the need to do something, anything more. The whispers of injustice echoed in every corner of the school, stories shared in hushed tones about kids who had been caught in the same web he had escaped. The feeling of helplessness mixed with an overwhelming urge to take action. One afternoon, he found himself at the library again. This time, the air felt different, it buzzed with purpose. Zion approached Mr. Langford, who was sifting through a pile of overdue books. "I want to help," Zion blurted out, his heart racing. Langford looked up, surprised but intrigued. "Help with what? You're already a hero to some of these kids. They're talking about you." "I want to do more than just be a symbol," Zion replied, urgency thick in his voice. "I want to actually help them understand their rights, what to do if they ever find themselves in a situation like mine." "That's a noble cause," Langford said thoughtfully, folding his hands. "But you know it won't be easy. You have to be ready for the pushback." "I'm ready," Zion stated firmly, determination flooding his veins. "I want to create change, make sure kids like me don't feel powerless." Over the next few weeks, Zion poured every ounce of energy he had into the initiative. He researched laws, crafted pamphlets, and prepared presentations, poring over every legal textbook he could find. He understood the importance of educating kids about their rights, about how to stand up for themselves against officers who might not act justly. Finally, he organized an assembly at school, inviting every student. He stood in front of the entire student body, his heart racing. "I'm not just a statistic," he began, his voice carrying the weight of his experience. "I'm Zion Whitaker, a 14-year-old boy wrongfully accused of a crime I didn't commit." His words filled the auditorium, capturing the attention of every student. No one should have to prove their innocence. We need to educate ourselves about our rights and stand together. If we're going to change the narrative, we have to take a stand. Whispers of encouragement buzzed through the crowd. Friends and classmates began to nod. They were listening. Zion felt the spark igniting once more. This wasn't just his fight, it was theirs too. The weight of expectation fueled his courage, and for the first time since the courtroom, he felt a flicker of hope. But as his confidence grew, so did the opposition. The following week, a hasty note slipped under the library door caught his attention. Words scrawled in tight handwriting, dripping with threat. "Stay out of it, kid. You don't know who you're messing with." Zion's heart sank, but he squared his shoulders. It was a warning, a glimpse of the resistance he'd face. He glanced at Mr. Langford, who watched silently, concern etched on his features. With every obstacle that arose, Zion felt an unwavering commitment to protect not just himself, but others like him who had been wronged. The shadows that loomed over their community couldn't be ignored any longer. The fight was personal, and he would not be silenced. As he prepared for the next assembly, Zion realized this wasn't just the start of something new, it was the dawn of a movement. And like any great movement, it needed a voice, his voice. He was ready to turn the tide, not just for himself, but for every kid who felt powerless in a world that had made them believe they were just a number. The system may have tried to silence him, but Zion Whittaker was not done fighting. This was just the beginning. The system may have tried to silence him, but Zion Whittaker was not done fighting. This was just the beginning. With every ounce of determination coursing through his veins, he focused on preparing for the next assembly. The threats may have loomed large, but Zion understood that the battle for justice required sacrifice, courage, and above all, a unified front. In the days that followed, Zion threw himself into organizing the assembly with relentless fervor. Posters decorated the school's hallways, the headlines proclaiming "Know Your Rights, Stand Up for Justice." His classmates rallied around him, some even offering to help with the setup, while others showed interest in sharing their stories. Encouragement poured in from unexpected corners, friends he'd barely spoken to and even upperclassmen, humbled by the courage he displayed. It didn't take long before students began to share their own experiences, gathering in small groups, whispering about encounters with the police and unjust accusations. On the day of the assembly, the gymnasium buzzed with an energy that crackled in the air like static electricity. Students took their seats, chattering and laughing, unaware of the powerful message they were about to receive. His mother stood in the back, pride shining in her eyes as she adjusted her scarf, ready to lend him her quiet strength.
Taking a deep breath, Zion stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinding him momentarily. He glanced out at the sea of faces, a mixture of excitement and skepticism swirling among them. He could feel the impending gravity of the moment pressing down on him, but he reminded himself of why he was there, not just to share his story, but to spark a change that rippled far beyond these walls. "Hey, everyone!" he called out, hands gripping the edges of the podium. "I want to thank you all for being here today. This isn't just about me or what happened. It's about all of us." A hush fell over the crowd, eyes focusing on him, curiosity igniting their attention. Many of you might not realize how easy it is to become a victim of a system that's supposed to protect us. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I stood before a court accused of crime I didn't commit, and I realized something vital. Knowledge is power. When you know your rights, you can stand up for yourself and for others." When he spoke, every word resonated with a raw authenticity that drew in the audience. He recounted his experience from the moment he was handcuffed, detailing the feeling of helplessness, the threat of a plea deal, and finally, the powerful moment of his own triumph in court. Each detail sharpened the reality of what so many others faced but often felt too afraid to speak about. As he shared the core of his message, the importance of knowing their rights, students leaned in closer. They were captivated, listening intently as he spoke of their right to remain silent, the importance of asking for a lawyer, and how a simple misunderstanding could spiral into a nightmare. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Zion continued, "but the decision to do what's right despite it. Together, we can dismantle a system that thrives on silence." Murmurs broke out, students exchanging glances, some nodding in agreement. It felt invigorating, like a movement igniting right before his eyes. He wrapped up his speech with a simple but powerful call to action. "Let's educate ourselves and each other. If we can stand together, we can break down these walls and demand change." As he left the stage, adrenaline coursed through him, and a wild cheer erupted from the audience. He spotted Lorraine beaming with joy, and an overwhelming sense of accomplishment washed over him. But as he basked in the afterglow of the assembly, a nagging thought burrowed into his mind. The threat he had received wasn't just empty words. It was a warning from those who were willing to protect their own at any cost. A few days later, as Zion walked home from school, the air felt different, charged with tension. He could sense that something was looming in the shadows. It was as if the universe was holding its breath. When he approached his street corner, he noticed a couple of kids hanging around the nearby hardware store, their eyes flickering toward him, whispering behind their hands. "What's wrong?" he called out, stopping a few feet away. There was an air of unease, as if the neighborhood itself was feeling the repercussions of his rising voice. One of the boys, a lanky kid named Malik, stepped forward. "Zion, man, some folks are talking. They are saying you need to back off. They don't like the noise you're making." A tight knot formed in Zion's stomach. "Who?" "Just people. You know how it is. Kincaid has connections, and is not taking this lightly." Malik winced, casting a glance over his shoulder, afraid of being overheard. The implications rolled over Zion like a wave. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about protecting the kids around him. He would have to be more careful. Yet, deep down, he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. Over the next few days, the atmosphere shifted further. Fewer students came to the library's gatherings, less willingness to join them in discussions. It felt as if whispers of intimidation crawled through the school, and the sense of unity began to crumble. Zion couldn't allow that. It was now or never. One afternoon, as he pored over legal tech for the umpteenth time, Mr. Langford approached, leaning against the counter. "You all right, kid?" Zion sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It just feels like everything we built is crumbling. People are scared." Mr. Langford nodded, his expression serious. "Fear is a powerful weapon. But that's why your voice matters, Zion. Fear only holds power when we let it." Zion's mind raced with possibilities, feelings of helplessness stealthily morphing into an iron determination. Maybe it's time to show them. I need to rally everyone again, but this time, make it real. With Langford's encouragement, Zion envisioned a rally. It would be more than just an informational session. They would reclaim their voices, and they would do it together. The only way to combat the shadow looming over them was to shine brighter than before. They spent the next week planning fervently. Flyers filled the cafeteria, each promising a safe space for discussion and action, encouraging everyone to come forward with their experiences. "Let's invite some local advocates," Zion suggested as they plotted their strategy one late afternoon. "People who can share their own stories and empower us." Langford smiled, clearly pleased with the direction they were heading. "That's a great idea. If we can get them to stand with you, it could really elevate the rally." The day of the rally arrived, bright and warm, a stark contrast to the tension Zion felt in his bones. As he stood at the front of the gathered crowd, the sun dappling through the trees, he took a deep breath, eyes scanning to see familiar faces among the new ones. His heart pounded as he took the MIC, "Thank you all for being here. This isn't just about one kid. This is about every single voice that has ever been ignored. Today, we'll stand together." As cheers erupted, Zion felt a wave of hope wash over him. He had turned that tide of fear into awareness. They were no longer alone. He was ready to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who deserved justice, a system built to protect and serve, not to condone silence or fear. Yet, in that moment of triumph, Zion caught sight of a figure lurking at the edge of the gathering, a tall man wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, watching. The look in his eyes was sharp, unnervingly familiar, and behind him, shadows gathered, whispering among themselves. The threats had been more than just words. The struggle was becoming real. As the rally progressed, Zion couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, that the challenge was escalating. The system might have tried to silence him, but he was just getting started. And he couldn't turn back now. The man in the cap was back, lurking just outside the community center, his dark silhouette a stark contrast against the flickering street lights. Zion felt a chill run down his spine, a cold sweat forming at the back of his neck. A sense of danger loomed, but he could not let fear seep into the heart of the gathering.
Turning back to the crowd, he saw the energy that pulsed through the room, young faces filled with defiance, parents exchanging quiet words of resolve. The collective spirit was strong, a beacon of hope against the shadows that threatened to engulf them. Zion took a deep breath, pushing down the rising anxiety, and focused on the task at hand. "Tonight," he continued, his voice resonating with confidence, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who has ever felt targeted, marginalized, or silenced. We stand united, and that's our greatest strength." The crowd erupted in applause, and for a moment, Zion allowed himself to bask in the collective spirit of his peers. Then he glanced again at the window, his heart quickening as he spotted the man raising a phone to capture the scene. A surge of anger ignited within him. This was intimidation, an attempt to undermine what they were building. "People out there want to see us scared," he said, directing his words toward the eyes that gazed back at him. "They want us to feel alone. But we're not. We're stronger together. So tonight, let's share our stories and support each other. We all matter." The atmosphere shifted. Students leaned forward, eager to participate, and hands shot up, ready to share their experiences. One by one, students stood and began recounting their encounters with authority. Stories of racial profiling, being unjustly stopped or treated with suspicion. Each tale, raw and powerful, wove a rich tapestry of pain and resilience that filled the room with emotion. As they shared their stories, Zion couldn't shake the feeling that there was power in their vulnerability. They were showing one another that they were not alone. Their collective voice began to rise, drowning out the fears that loomed outside. Suddenly, a loud crash cut through the murmur of stories, a shattering sound echoing from a nearby window. The group fell silent, eyes wide in shock. Zion turned toward the noise, heart racing. He saw a brick lying on the floor, dust billowing around it. Somebody had thrown it through the window. Panic rippled through the crowd, but Zion raised a hand, urgency in his voice. "Stay calm. Stay together. We can't let fear take over." But as the shock wore off, anger surged. "Who did that?" someone shouted. "They're trying to scare us. They want us to fight each other, to split us up," another voice cried out. Zion stepped forward, fueled by the collective outrage, the weight of the moment pressing on him. "This is exactly what they want. They want us to be afraid. They want division. But we refuse to be their pawns. We are here for each other." The group shifted, faces set with resolve. They broke into whispers, determined, plotting their next move. "Let's take our anger back to the streets," a girl named MIA suggested. "Let's march and show them we won't be intimidated." A chorus of agreement spread through the room, fueled by the adrenaline pumping through their veins. Zion nodded, heart racing as he thought about the consequences. This group had quickly transformed from a small gathering of students into a sizable movement. But as they began to discuss logistics, the route they would take, the chance they would raise, Zion's thoughts drifted back to the man outside the center. The threat of confrontation loomed. He could feel it in the air. "I think we should take a moment first," he said, cutting into the fervor. "We need to plan this carefully. We have to make sure we're safe." The crowd quieted, tension settling into a cautious anticipation. They gathered closer, leaning in as Zion led them through a strategy, urging them to enlist their parents or trusted adults to help keep them safe. Youth should lead, but precautions must be set. "Let's stand strong," he urged, "and keep our eyes open. We'll document everything, and if they do anything reckless, we're prepared." As they finalized their plans, Zion's determination sharpened. Their movement was becoming real, a force capable of fearlessly speaking against injustice, and he vowed to protect that fire burning within them. As the meeting wrapped up, he threw one last look towards the broken window. The silhouettes outside had vanished, but he could feel the weight of their threats lingering like a storm cloud hanging low. Whispers of hope and defiance filled the room as students embraced one another, some excited, others still shaken. They shared their numbers, promising to keep in touch as they walked out into the cool night air. Zion headed home, replaying the night's intensity in his mind. He wanted to feel victorious, but concern gnawed at him, where the man in the cap had gone, and what retaliation awaited them after the rally. His mother was waiting up when he returned, worry etched across her brows. "What happened?" she asked, eyes searching his for answers. "We faced some intimidation," he said, hesitating before meeting her gaze. "There was a brick thrown through a window." Her face softened. "That's alarming, Zion. But it also means you're making waves. People want to silence you because they're scared of the change you're advocating for." "I know," he replied, running his hands through his hair. "I just worry about everyone. What happens if they come after us?" "We confront it together," Lorraine assured him. "You have each other's backs, and that's what makes you strong." Her words wrapped around him like a blanket, providing comfort amid the turmoil. But even as she spoke, Zion felt that chill creeping back in, knowing that the fight ahead would be more challenging than they had anticipated. The next morning, as he prepared for school, his phone buzzed incessantly. Alerts flooded in. Pictures and videos of the previous night's rally were circulating on social media, some accompanied by derogatory comments. Zion inhaled sharply. The hostility was palpable, but he refused to let it deter him. With every act of opposition, his resolve sharpened. The journey was becoming more dangerous, but it was also igniting a fire within him. As he walked through the school's front doors that morning, a surge of solidarity seemed to course through the hallways. Familiar faces greeted him with knowing nods, whispers of support flitting around. Determined, Zion approached the cafeteria, feeling the buzz of urgency and anticipation. The next chapter of their fight was just beginning, and just like the rally, it would be a collective effort. He stood at the front of the cafeteria, heart pounding as he prepared to speak. "Hey, everyone," he called, drawing attention. "We need to stand together now more than ever. They've thrown a brick at us, but we're not going to let that break our spirit. We're going to show them who we are, and we won't back down." Faces turned toward him, hope glimmering in their eyes as murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. This wasn't just about one movement anymore. It was about creating a force that could no longer be silenced. Zion's voice grew stronger each time he spoke about justice, community, and resilience. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. Threats would multiply, but he had faith in their unwavering strength. Together, they would rise, and together, they would face whatever shadows lurked on the fringes. No matter how intense the fight became, they were united now. They would no longer accept the silence imposed upon them. As the sound of encouragement washed over him, Zion felt ready for the storm ahead. He wouldn't stand down, none of them would. The fight for justice was just beginning, and they would face it together. As the applause faded in the cafeteria, Zion couldn't help but feel the electricity coursing through the room. Students rallied around him, their eyes shining with determination and shared purpose. They were ready, for action, for solidarity, for a fight against the forces that sought to divide and intimidate them. "Let's organize a march," MIA suggested, her voice cutting clearly through the murmurs. "We should take our message out into the community." Zion's pulse quickened at the idea. This was not just about their school or their immediate neighborhood. It was about making their voices heard citywide. "We can create a path that connects our school to the town square," he said, envisioning banners held high, chants ringing out across the streets, the shared heartbeat of their community echoing with every step. "We'll invite everyone, students, parents, and community members." The room filled with excitement, students leaning in closer, brainstorming ideas for slogans, signs, and songs. They planned every detail, from safety protocols to refreshments, ready to turn their fear into a clarion call for justice. The atmosphere transformed from apprehension to a commitment to stand as one. "Let's spread the word," Zion said, his voice rising over the din. "We'll use social media, flyers, and word of mouth, whatever it takes to fill the streets with support." He picked up his phone, quickly updating an event on their social media platform to launch the march. As the days passed, the energy built up like a storm swelling on the horizon. Students spread flyers throughout the school and shared posts online, their calls echoed by friends and families. Every conversation buzzed with excitement and a sense of purpose. The march became the talk of the town, drawing over 100 friends and allies. But amid the momentum, the threat still loomed. Zion was acutely aware of the man in the cap who had haunted his thoughts, and more troubling signs of hostility sprang up as the date approached. Students reported cars slowing down suspiciously as they left school, and anonymous messages flooded social media, warning them to stand down or face serious consequences. Yet instead of dampening their spirits, the threats only ignited a fiercer resolve within Zion and his friends. He gathered with them in a downtown park for one last meeting before the march. "This is not just about us anymore," he said, looking around at the determined faces. "This is for everyone who has felt the weight of oppression or dismissal. We're here to stand up for those who can't. We will not be deterred by fear." "Yeah! Together we're stronger," someone shouted, and the room answered with chants of support, echoing through the trees surrounding them. As dawn broke on the day of the march, Zion felt a whirlwind of emotions, hope mingling with fear, purpose interlaced with a sense of vulnerability. He arrived at the school where students gathered, their faces painted with determination. Banners flew high, slogans brightening the streets while chants of justice for all rang out, creating an atmosphere filled with both joy and steely resolve. The community poured in, families joining hands with students, adults lending their voices to the chorus, and soon, the colors and sounds swirled together into a vivid tapestry. Zion led the way, a heartbeat of energy as he marched forward, legions of young people behind him, shoulders squared, hearts ablaze with a collective strength. The path traced through their neighborhood, drawing people from every corner, both curious onlookers and allies. The sound of footsteps reverberated against concrete, but amid the celebration, another sound began to emerge, one that chilled him to the bone. Shouting rose in the distance as they turned a corner, a group of counter-protesters awaited them, faces twisted in anger, banners displaying their disdain for the message Zion and his friends heralded. Zion's heart raced, but he took a deep breath, recalling the strength of the people surrounding him. "Stay strong," he called out. "We will not be silenced." As they approached, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Counter-protesters shouted insults and brandished intimidating signs, but the marchers responded with solidarity, their voices rising in chants of hope and unity. The two sides collided in an electric standoff, and Zion felt the weight of the situation pressing down upon him. Anger sparked, fists clenched, but he took a step forward, raising his hands. "This isn't about hate," he shouted over the noise, heart pounding. "We're here to amplify voices, to create a future built on understanding and change." One by one, his friends echoed his words, standing beside him. The chants of unity and resilience felt like waves crashing against the barriers of anger. His heart raced, knowing that they stood at a crossroads, not just for themselves, but for everyone watching. Suddenly, someone from the counter-protest began to hurl insults that felt personal, attacks aimed squarely at their character and efforts. A ripple of fear flickered through the marchers, but Zion held his ground. He had to. "Focus, everyone. Let's remember why we're here," he urged, locking eyes with those closest to him. Their chants held ground against the vitriol, slowly gaining momentum, swelling into an anthem that pushed through the hostility. "We are here. We are loud. We will not back down." The crowd around him began to stir with energy, reflecting his hope back at him. The harsh words from the others became muffled, the opposing side's anger slowly dissipating against the strength of shared voices rising together, like a wall of strength. Just as clarity flooded him, he spotted a familiar figure lingering at the edges, the man in the cap, observing, his shadow stretching long against the pavement. Zion's heart raced again, but this time, instead of fear, anger blazed a new path in him. "Hey, you!" Zion shouted, pointing directly at the man. "You've watched in silence for too long. We're here to create change. We want you with us." A silence fell across the protest. The man with the cap stiffened, caught off guard, his posture shifting as if considering Zion's words. "Join us," Zion urged, voice ringing with earnest defiance. "You're welcome. We want everyone to share in the conversation, not to divide us." The man hesitated, then slowly lowered his gaze. "You don't know what you're getting into," he muttered, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Then talk to us." Zion called back, allowing a break in the chaos. "Let's have a conversation. Don't you want a better community too?" The air hummed with tension, and Zion held on to the moment, hoping that even a lone soul might resonate with his call. Moments stretched into an eternity, and the man's eyes flickered with something, a glimpse of recognition, perhaps. Finally, he turned away, disappearing into the crowd, his figure swallowed by the tide of people. Zion felt a mix of emotions surge through him, but he didn't allow doubt to shadow the kind of change they were still creating. As the march continued, their unified voices pierced through the chaos, washing over everyone present. The anger from the counter-protest lost its grip, fading into distant echoes as the overwhelming wave of unity flowed toward the future. In those moments, amidst the noise and the struggles, Zion realized that the power of their movement was far beyond the eyes of a solitary observer. They had stepped out of the shadows, illuminated their cause, and carved a path through doubt and fear. As they arrived at the town square, they paused to take in the moment, gathered beneath the bright sun, a sea of people united in purpose. They had transformed uncertainty into strength. Zion's voice rang out as he clasped the microphone once more, standing at the front. "We are a community, committed to understanding, compassion, and change. And as long as we stand together, we will fight for what's right." "No more silence," rang out the voices. "No more fear." Cheers erupted, and in that perfect moment, Zion felt as if they had changed something intangible. They weren't just fighting against the shadows, they were creating light of their own in ways they never dreamed possible. As the crowd surged and the sounds of camaraderie filled the air, Zion knew that whatever challenges awaited them, they were ready to face them together. The journey was only just beginning, but they had ignited a flame that would sparkle long into the future, emboldening others to rise and join the cause, because they had found their voice, and it would not be silenced again.